The Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program represents a rewarding academic professional development opportunity for faculty at Montgomery College. The fellowships are a product of a unique collaboration between Montgomery College and the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access. It's the first of its kind between the Smithsonian Institution and a community college.
Jonah Colson is an assistant professor in the American English Language program at the Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus. He earned a BA degree in English and Spanish from Goucher College, a MFA in Poetry from American University, a MA in Linguistics from George Mason University, and an English as a Second Language certification from Servicios Lingüísticos in Madrid, Spain. In addition to teaching, he is an active poet and translator who has numerous publications in recognized journals and anthologies. His background in literature and poetry prompted him to apply for the 2015 Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship.
So my project for our theme, I Too Am America, Understanding the American Immigrant Experience, I titled my project Immigrant Beyond the Single Identity. So I'm going to start with a brief quote, two questions that one of my students gave in her final presentation, which I wish I would have known a little bit before I started this project because it really gave me a different perspective. This student happened to be from Romania. And she said that while she was living in Romania, she was young, she was ambitious, there were opportunities that Romania did not provide. And people often asked her, when are you going to America? Right? So when are you going to the United States? Then she got here, she's been here for over a year, enrolled at Montgomery College, and now she finds that people often ask her, when are you going back to Romania? So I found this very interesting, that our students seem to be caught between these two questions, between these two, when are you going to the United States? And then once they get here, they're asked, when are you going back, right? So it provided a really interesting way to think about the word immigrant and its connotations and the way it's being overused and misused, specifically in our current political landscape. So I began to apply this idea, once again, sort of filling in the gap of immigrant and this identity. What is it? What is it to our students, and what does it mean? I teach non-native speakers. I teach in the American English Language program, which is our ESL program here at Montgomery College. So I implemented this project in the highest level reading course. It's called Reading 930. They have to pass this course in order to graduate to all credit level classes. So a few student learning outcomes from this class are to utilize comprehension skills to understand paragraphs, short essays, narratives, and freshman-level content-based text, to apply these skills to freshman-level content, including summarizing, and the inclusion of technology and cultural competency, which I found to be a very important one, specifically for the integration of the Smithsonian project. And my project was divided into 3 assignments over the course of the semester. So the first assignment, which kind of came out of a discussion during our cohort early on last semester, was I wanted them to speak as if they were one of our first 20 presidents. Right? So investigating the first 20 presidents, they were able to learn about American history, culture, American values, and it also coincides with the book we use on American values and the way in which history has developed up until present day. So the objectives here were to utilize the portrait gallery as a gateway to research and exploration, to read a portrait, interpreting from detail and observation, to investigate and report on the life and accomplishments of an assigned president, and to navigate some approved websites and databases for research. So the assignment itself was pretty basic. They would give a 5 to 7 minute presentation discussing the early life, the presidency, and then the post-presidency of their assigned president. And also give a 1-page response to the portrait that I gave them. I didn't think about this at all, and then later during the presentations, many of my students did not have a post-presidency component because a few presidents died in office, which I was not aware of. My lack of American history, but there I learned with my students. So here are a few pictures from the National Portrait Gallery, which I think is a really good first museum to go to. It's a very, very different feel from the other museum that we used, which was the Museum of American History. So some of my students, they were assigned their president. I gave George Washington as an example, and they were assigned the first presidents 2 through 19. So they use this as sort of a gateway into show how they can explore American history, the beginnings of America, through the National Portrait Gallery. The second assignment was objects that define and redefine America. And for this, we went to the National Museum of American History. The objectives here were to explore the museum, to research and investigate an object that defines America. And then I wanted them to counter that object or supplement the object with something that represents their lives, their culture, or their language, or their life in America as is now. And they were required to do a group presentation, a PowerPoint, and also do some research and investigation. So I gave students the first object. In the innovation wing at the National Museum of American History, there's an Apple I computer. And they countered and supplemented that with an iPad and discussed how an iPad is relevant to their life here socially and academically. The second, another group, I gave Lincoln's hat, which is always a popular one. And they decided to counter that with Pharrell Williams' hat, which I found to be very interesting. And as we discussed it after their presentation, even more implications and conclusions came to light. So the idea that Lincoln's hat was worn by a man who, of course, was active in the abolishment of slavery in the United States, and then to supplement that with a hat that in some ways does mirror that sort of that top hat worn by an African American, a successful African American. So in many ways it did begin to counter. And my students were quite sure that one day Pharrell Williams' hat was going to be in a museum, and I'm sure actually it will. So I think it was a very good choice. The third assignment was I asked them, again, to go to the Museum of American History and to investigate an object that related back to their own immigration story. So first I had them compose a narrative of their immigration story and then choose an object that in some way, shape, or form reflected part of their immigration story. Some of my possible examples were the ruby slippers, which are one of my favorites. Maybe the slippers in American culture symbolize the idea of fantasy, but always wanting to return home, or an object in Julia Child's kitchen. And from this narrative and the object, they could transform it into a poem, a video, a PowerPoint, or an exhibit to share with the class. So one of my students chose a helicopter, which I believe is in the America on the Move exhibit. And he said that the helicopter reflected his transportation to get to the United States. It was his first time he'd been on a real bus, on a plane, so transportation was a very vital component in his immigration story. So I'll just show just a few moments of, he composed a video from a database called Animoto. It's a free video website. I won't show all of it. And during the course, when the video played, he also narrated, right? So there's a song in the background, and then he narrated his own sort of immigration story. So just a moment of that. And my second example here, a student chose an inaugural dress because she had brought her wedding dress with her from her home country. So that wonderful exhibit of the presidential, the first ladies. So I think in a moment you get to see the actual wedding dress she brought with her from her home country, which was Ghana. And again, she was narrating over top of the music because you can't narrate actually in the video. You have to narrate live on site. So it was a wonderful, you got to take a look into the students' lives and also a way in which they were finding a bridge between their lives and an object in the museum, which was very nice. Another student of mine who was from Moldova, they're very famous for their wine, which I did not know. There was a wine barrel and wine crusher in the Museum of American History, and she chose that as a reflection of her home culture and relating that back to her culture here in the United States. So there we all are at the Museum of American History in front of the food exhibit, which is one of the favorites for everybody, I think. So again, some of the takeaways, some of the conclusions that I drew from this project were that through these assignments, they were able to understand their place in the American experience by utilizing the Smithsonian. I concluded that they are both Ethiopian or Haitian or Romanian and American. They don't have to be both. They can begin to fill that gap. And they're creating a new place in the cultural and political landscape of America. And this fellowship helped my students to tell their complex and multi-storied identities that go well beyond the word immigrant. So it was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for me and my students. Thank you very much.